something that's supposed to connect you and enable you and encourage you to love each other has never caused this many problems. The amount of infighting that religion is bringing to people is insane. Like, all of these sins seem to be very heavily sitting in the one place it's supposed to be pure, and yet we still practice it. Why? Why is it that we are still obsessed with this idea?
You know, people say, oh, this is so stupid, this is archaic, but think of it this way. If you don't have God, you will have a God. In the absence of God, humans create gods. We create neon gods, artificial gods. Dopamine becomes our god. Pleasure, hedonism becomes our god. Here in America, our god is pleasure. We worship pleasure.
Okay, Adam, you're a mental health professional. You've studied the science of psychology for how many years?
At least 15 by now.
15 years you've studied the science of psychology. Yet still, as a practicing mental health professional, as a person who has seen many aspects of life, you choose to still believe in God. In fact, not just believe in God, but you've gone pretty extreme in your belief, and you're actually part of the Catholic Church, which is very organized, very old, and very structured. Why is that so important to you, and why should anybody in the modern day and age, with the technology we have, with the amount of knowledge, the freedom we have, even need to believe in religion?
That's a fair question. Becoming Catholic is actually one of the newest changes in my life. First,
really?
First, I was a scientist, and then I was driving into psychology. I was a practitioner. Science, I think, is ultimately what led me to God and led me to my faith, and ultimately led me into the organized religion that I'm a part of now.
Science led most people away from faith throughout the whole of the 20th century. Why is it that it's switched that for you?
We've created this weird dichotomy where you have to either believe in spiritual essence, or you get to believe in physical sciences and the physically measured things around us. I think that that's a very false dichotomy, and it has been throughout most of history. There's a very famous quote that says that science without faith is blind, and faith without science is lame. And it's very true. I think that the two go hand in hand. We need to be able to see and measure the things around us, but we also need to be able to quantify maybe the things that we can't see or measure quite yet.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the purpose then of this, even the need and the purpose for belief in something like God. And just, for the viewers at home, I am actually religious. I'm also part of an organized religion. I'm Orthodox Christian. Adam is Catholic. We both have actually ended up finding our way to this type of faith in recent years.
But that's what's so weird about you and me both. Our stories is we both started off very much in opposition to that. We started off as more, I don't want to say intellectuals, it sounds pompous, but very careful thinkers, very articulate thinkers, very logical men, excelling in our work, science for myself with psychology, systems, finance, and
business.
everything for you, business. We both start off in very logical realms. We both succeeded in a number of ways, struggled in others, certainly, but ultimately what's weird about us is that we began believing in organized religion after we had developed those patterns of thought, which is so strange because, I grew up in California, and the prevailing idea is that you only believe in religious things if you are ignorant and poorly informed. And that's what's weird about you and me. We fly in the face of that.
We do, but also it makes me think back to my work with Jordan Peterson and the work he specifically did in the series around the psychological significance of biblical stories. And he disassembled biblical stories and said, look, religious belief apart, what is so important here that speaks truly to our nature as humans? That was the first step that I started taking towards understanding the significance of faith. I think that an important step we need to make here, for you as a scientist, for me as just a practical guy, we need to talk about what is it inside the big aspect of religion, faith, belief has so much value, because there's also a big difference between different forms of even Christianity. And I think we can talk about Christianity today because we both know it relatively well. I would love to have somebody we can talk to about Islam, about Judaism, about Hinduism, about Buddhism, and a lot of other religions. I think there's a lot of truth to it. I'm not educated enough. But for this purpose of this conversation, let's focus on Christianity specifically. So even in Christianity, there's so many different denominations. You know, there's the evangelical Christians, an entirely different way of worship. There's the Catholic Church. There's various non-denominationals, Protestants, different Orthodox churches. It is a giant pile of various customs, often opposing to each other, often in direct contradiction to each other. They have all called each other heretics on every single occasion possible. The amount of infighting that religion is bringing to people is insane. Right? It's like this idea that something that's supposed to connect you and enable you and encourage you to love each other has never caused this many problems. Like it is just doing nothing seemingly but, tear people apart. Plus there's all these scandals out there, obviously, the Catholic Church and, the little kids and all the molestations that are happening there. A lot of the things that even, for example, in the Protestant churches, non-denominational mega churches, the abuse of wealth and power, in the Orthodox Church, corruption, like all of these sins seem to be very heavily sitting in the one place it's supposed to be pure, and yet we still practice it. Why? Why is it that we are still obsessed with this idea that organized religion is necessary? Why do we even need to believe in God? The topic of today's conversation is, do modern men even need God? We have science, we have tech, we have if we lived 200 years ago with our technology, they would have called us God. Literally, we can see, communicate, fly. What else can we do? And yet now that we have it, we're still seeking for that entity. Lots of questions there. Let's start unpacking. Why is this so necessary?
This is a fantastic question because I had a young coaching client yesterday, actually, who was lamenting the fact that he has no structure by which to measure how similar or dissimilar the other people in his life are from his own moral structure, his own philosophical structure. And what I told him was, society has had that for all of human history. We called it religion. That was a major piece of religion, was to create a unified belief system, not necessarily of who you believe created you necessarily, but what are the proper methods for conducting yourself in relationships with other human beings. It's really what religion even is built for, is what is the proper relational structure for a human. And we have done away with much of that. Even that component really is something that we need to bring back. Even if we don't necessarily fully bring back every single person must believe in the same structure, we do need a codified structure of beliefs of how to live relationally with each other.
Why? Why is that a necessary component of the human psyche? Can we not exist without the idea of God, a higher power, of a creator? Why can't we simply follow the agnostic view or even the atheistic view and say that we don't need that? We can be humanistic. We can say that the human evolution is the apex of evolution. There is nothing else other than but us. And yet that does not make us happy somehow?
You're talking about much more of like an Ayn Rand sort of structure where everything is fully permitted and moral relativism is the absolute. And that structure sounds appealing to most people who have lived under maybe authoritarian parents who shoved ideas down your throat, right? People with more of a libertarian bend who tend to be more avoidantly attached, I'll just say. The people who reject that sort of overarching structure, they are afraid often of being held accountable to somebody else's standards. And that's fair. Nobody should be held accountable to arbitrary structures and arbitrary standards. So the purpose of this conversation is not me saying the Catholic Church should conquer America and make everybody become Catholic by force, right? I certainly
would you want that?
No, I actually firmly opposed joining the Catholic Church myself. It was a horrific decision that was very, very hard on my part.
Okay.
I only joined the church only against every argument that I made against it was this seems to be in line with the structure of the human brain. The relational foundations.
The Catholic Church is in line with the structure of the human brain.
The teachings seem to be in line with what will give you proper brain chemistry.
Okay, so this I want to dig into because now we're talking practical.
Sure.
Right? We're not talking about, theoretical or personal experiences. You're claiming now as the attachment specialist, as a psychology expert, as a practitioner, that organized religion is the entity that allows our brains to work in an optimal fashion. Is that correct?
I would say that has been its role throughout all of human history, even back into tribal villages with a shaman who tells you what the spirits want you to do. At least all of you have a codified structure.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point, right? There's a lot of different denominations out there.
Sure.
And there's a lot of denominations that are not organized. They say, I do not need a priest or a church to have a connection with God, right? But yet you're saying, having studied psychologist, you are actually going to the Catholic Church, of all churches, and you're saying that that is the best place for you to find that optimal brain chemistry. Please explain why.
For me, it absolutely was. So through the catechism, for specific answers, we look at the catechism of the Catholic Church, where they break down, here are all the possible scenarios you could find yourself in. And here are how the teachings of Jesus Christ should be applied in that scenario. Okay,
so is it a guidebook? Is that a how-to manual? What is that?
In essence, it is a guidebook and a how-to manual. It talks, for example, about making sure that when you are engaged in bedroom activity with your
are there
partner,
pictures?
There are not.
Okay.
Not for us. No, we don't get that enjoyment. No, it talks about how the bedroom experience absolutely must be a unitive experience for the partners. So we are explicitly banned, for example, from harming the male partner, harming the female partner in some way, or diminishing her dignity during the act, or in any way taking her, as it were, against her will. It must be a unitive growing experience where you have to be drawing closer together as a couple through the
There's a lot of laws that do that already, to be honest.
Well, there are laws that say don't harm, but this in essence says do good. Do good for each other. That's the difference of religion. The state says don't do harm, but religion says you must do good. You must add to others. You must nurture others. You must care for others. The state can't command you to love your neighbor, but your religion can say you must love your neighbor or you are living in opposition to everything that you were built for.
Okay, but with the state specifically, if you choose to go and break the law, you will be punished, which is what holds people in line. In religion, it's not like, you go to the priest and then you tell them that somebody's transgressed upon you, and then he just picks up the big stick and goes and hits somebody over the head. What is it then that holds people accountable to this now moral code and ethic?
Yeah, you're asking me why you don't get zapped with lightning when you break the 10 Commandments.
And shouldn't you be? Why does God allow so many transgressions to happen on this earth? Well, there's a lot of people walking around that could arguably be, we can say about them that should be zapped with lightning. In fact, the U.S. government tends to use drones on people like that, and they usually do zap them with, various forms of lightnings.
I have two answers to that. Why does God allow us to transgress and commit sin? I'll answer it in reverse first. Why doesn't he zap you with lightning? I don't think he has to.
Great.
I look at the 10 Commandments and, people say, oh, this is so stupid. This is archaic. Even some denominations of Christians say the 10 Commandments no longer apply, and they'll claim that. If you violate the 10 Commandments, your brain chemistry gets so broken. Your relations get so broken. Your serotonin plunges.
Let's take the first one. What is the first commandment?
Thou shalt not have no other gods before me.
Great. So that is the number one commandment. Mm-hmm. In the gospel, Jesus says that is the first rule, and the second rule is that love thy neighbor as you love thyself.
Yep.
Right? So we actually have that additional commandment. So what happens if you deny the existence, not even the existence, but the central existence of God?
We humans have to have something that functions as our highest priority. And I think that's what the purpose of the first commandment is make me your highest priority. Because then what flows from that is these processes for living that will give you the best brain chemistry, but also form the foundation of a structured human civilization, which can actually survive beyond moral relativism and stealing from each other. But think of it this way. If you don't have God, you will have a God. In the absence of God, humans create gods. We create neon gods, artificial gods. Dopamine becomes our god. Pleasure, hedonism becomes our god. Here in America, our god is pleasure. We worship pleasure. We worship anything that can give us pleasure. Pleasure is the highest form of good in America right now. That's the idea, is that if you are experiencing pleasure, you are living correctly. Anything that diminishes from your pleasure is therefore evil. Anyone who takes from your pleasure in any way, shape, or form forms the same function as the devil here in American secular religion, if you want to think of it that way. When you place God as the head of your priorities, then everything begins to shift, and then you form your moral compass around that, which should be, and is not always practiced properly, but should be the flow of those 10 commandments, especially derived from love.
So from the psychological standpoint, I've heard the term used before that every human has a God-shaped hole within them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I love that statement because it's so accurate. But what is that hole from a neurobiological perspective?
Oh, we are supposed to grow up with our parents getting oxytocin, GABA, vasopressin, serotonin, and some dopamine mixed in there, some good dopamine. We're supposed to get this chemical cocktail of love and connection with our parents. And what's fascinating is when you then go in and pray, when you immerse yourself into a relationship with the divine, you actually release many of the same brain chemicals on phenomenal pieces. In fact, this is one of the best practices that a person who is stressed out can really do, is go when you are stressed out, even if you can't calmly meditate, even if it's hard to breathe and do yoga and you can't take your benzo for the day or whatever it might be, if you can calm yourself enough to pray with the relationship with the divine, the connection you experience then floods you with those brain chemicals, which actually will calm you and will help you reach a place where you can then face that stress and that trial more easily.
So what is about the Roman Catholic specifically view of the definition of this God-shaped hole that's so attractive to you? Why did you go down that way? Why did you not go down the evangelical route, the Orthodox route, the non-denominational route? It sounds like a lot more fun.
Oh yeah, and let me differentiate very firmly here from the teachings of the Catholic Church and the application of some of those teachings from various people. There's been true evil committed by people who would claim religiosity, or even clergy. A number of clergy have been truly evil throughout history, and we can see that. Even former popes have been evil. I can't even begin to speak on the current pope one way or another. I won't.
I was going to ask.
I won't.
You will not. Okay.
I will not. That is for the next pope to criticize. And that's the stance of Catholics, is only the next pope can criticize the current pope. I will simply say this: the pope is meant to be a leader who is far away and that we don't hear very much from, and that we follow our own individual bishop, who then empowers our own individual priest, and we live through our priest, in essence, is really what we are doing.
And I do want to dig into this because that's another point which many people have had contention with. I had a contention with that myself as I was kind of navigating that circuit. But let's come back to the original question: is why is the Catholic definition of God so attractive to you? In fact, why do you feel that it's the only correct one?
Oh, what you're asking me is, why is the Christian definition of God true for me? And then why specifically the Catholic denomination as in their interpretation of following God is really what you would be asking me there.
Let's start with that.
Sure. So, to me, the Christian definition of God was fascinating because it really is the only religious structure that is based on grace instead of based on works. Not that other gods are evil and want to beat you with a stick, but the idea that we are going to utterly fail. We are going to mess up. We are going to fall short. We are going to be children who will not handle things correctly. And rather than, okay, I will get myself back on track. Okay, I will make up for it. Okay, I will atone for X, Y, or Z. We have somebody who has not erased that debt, but actually paid the debt for us, which really is the ultimate expression of actual authentic generosity and love. We have the ultimate form of a parental figure who has paid that in advance. People get that wrong about Christianity and imagine that your sins are erased. And they're not. They're paid, which is very different. Your debt has been paid. It doesn't go away. It was paid. And in essence, what you then do is agree to live in love with that deity. And that's really the cost, to live in love with that deity. And then to live in a fashion that is in line with your brain chemistry. That was what drew me to Christianity, was the understanding that it is built on secure attachment. Again, not the manifestation that many people really look at the Christian faith and say, oh, there's guilt. Catholic guilt is famous. Actually, in the Catholic faith, guilt is antithetical to it. You're not supposed to live in guilt. It's just that many people have badly formed it into it. So why the Christian faith? Because to me, it spoke the loudest about secure attachment and the way that the human brain chemistry is designed to be. Now, why the Catholic Church? Well, I look at that and I look at the way a family is structured, and there is one person who stands at the top of a hierarchy, and not as a cruel tyrant leader, but as a servant leader who nonetheless has to be the tiebreaker. And that was the purpose of essentially the Pope in the early years of the church, was to function as a bit of a tiebreaker, but also to unify the churches so the churches wouldn't scatter too hard. It's not that the Catholic Church is one monolithic structure that is exactly the same from this area to that area. It is that the core doctrinal beliefs are held together by one supreme bishop, as it were, who then casts the tiebreakers and at least unifies that doctrine so that it can at least transmit from one generation to the next successfully, which is why it's the largest denomination of Christians on the planet.
So this is a challenge that many other denominations issue to the Pope. Orthodoxy, my team included.
Oh, yeah. You guys split from us 1,000 years ago, although you would say we split from you.
Yes, you did.
Largely over the Pope. Largely over the Pope, yeah.
That's right. So here's a big question, and this is a major concern that many people have when it comes to organized religion. That's a lot of power concentrated in the hands of men who you yourself are saying are fallible, who have proven to be fallible, corrupt, in fact, even evil, time and time and time again, using that exact same structure. And yet you continue giving them this dearest, most precious, most foundational belief that they are the entities, the people that connect you to God. And many of our listeners are Protestants. Many of our listeners are not denominational, and they say, I do not need a priest to communicate with God. And yet you say that this is a good thing. Why is that?
I think that we also don't need parents to be able to feel the love of God, right? An orphan can come to believe in God. But to have a parental figure there who gives you a hug, who raises you, who loves you.
Your priest hugs you?
My priest hugs me all the time.
We need to talk.
No. No, yeah, I have a very warm relationship with my priest. Both of them, actually. We have a wonderful priest who's here from India. He hugs us all the time because he's not American. They have real warm physical affection. It's fantastic. But people don't understand necessarily the role of the Pope in the church, right? He is not, they say he's infallible. He's only infallible if he speaks from the throne of Peter, which really has only happened a very slim number of times throughout all of human history. He's also accountable to the magisterium, which is a system of learned scholars and individuals who function as the brain of the church a bit. They actually maintain the doctrine of the church, so he can't oppose the magisterium. He also doesn't have the power necessarily to change full doctrine of the church. Now, he can issue all kinds of papal decrees and papal things. We've seen some of those lately. One recently at the beginning of the year was very strongly to what some would consider the more progressive side of politics. And he just issued one last week of one that was very firmly to the conservative, what we would consider conservative camp. So he's making both sides very angry lately. And that, in essence, that those doctrinal pieces can be nullified by the next pope. If the next pope chooses to walk in, the next pope can
It sounds like a mess, Adam. This whole thing sounds like a mess.
It can be.
And the reason it sounds like a mess is because there's now, interests of parties, conservatives going back and forth. This is exactly the main challenge that other denominations put towards Catholicism.
Sure. Well,
why do you need forget the Pope? Okay, you guys do you, but why do you need a priest to intercede between you and God?
I see.
Okay, to give hugs, to do what else?
That's their main purpose, is just to hug you.
Nice.
No, the role of a priest, see, and what's fascinating is, again, I think that, and I got this wrong myself when I was younger and when I was very firmly anti-Catholic for more than 30 years of my life. What I didn't understand was not that you have to have a priest to be between you and God or else you can't reach God. Right? When Christ was crucified, the veil was torn. We were drawn into close communion with him. We have the Holy Spirit. The priest's purpose is really, in large part, to facilitate what we call the sacraments. At times to stand in the place of Christ, to be present for Christ, to issue us that direct forgiveness. Many times, even the Pope has said at times that you can go directly to God for forgiveness. And my priest is very clear on this. Yes, I am here acting in the place of Christ, and I am giving you that absolution. But at the same time, it's not me giving you the absolution. I am simply that vessel so that you can hear it, so you can experience it. I am the experiential, tangible component of God to you in this moment, and that is my role. And that's really the essence of the priest, is to be the tangible component of God, so that later we don't say, did I imagine that? Does God actually care for me? That's why they take those vows. That's why it becomes their vocation. That's why they step into it fully, is so that they can really embrace that part of themselves. And that's why we are so disgusted when they misuse it, when they violate the commandment that says, thou shalt not use the name of God in vain. They have taken the name of God in vain and used it to satisfy their own evil desires. The role of a priest is not to fulfill between you and God because you can't. It is to be the tangible presence of God so that you can fully experience God.
Let's just disaggregate this a little bit further. So you guys build relationships with God through the priest. What role does going to church? What role does speaking to the priest? What role does even going into the sacraments actually play in the creation of this secure attachment?
Well, why even go to church at all? Why even attend Mass?
Exactly.
Why even have a system where you even talk to other people?
So many people follow that specific worldview. Why? Yeah. I do not need organized religion. Why can't I simply be in connection, in association, in attunement with God through day-to-day life?
And I believed that myself for a long time. And what fully changed my mind was when I had my son. And I was loosely a Christian at that time. I very loosely had what I would consider Christian beliefs at the time. I was raised in a very hypocritical mega church where, money was the thing we discussed every week. And then there was a fun sermon that made you feel good. And then everyone went home and then completely ignored those teachings in their lives. I was raised in that. And when my son was born, I was 31, I think. By the time he was 2 years old, I remember thinking, I kind of want my son to go to heaven. I kind of want him to learn, but I also would like him to learn to be a good person. And I'd also like him to have a relationship with God as I have had a relationship with God. And I would kind of like to teach him that. How am I going to teach him that? And then I thought, well, what am I going to teach him? Well, how am I going to show him it's real? Well, who is he going to be around if it all looks fake? Well, what am I supposed to do? And I remember trying to figure all of that out on my own, and then it occurred to me, I was trying to invent religion. I was trying to invent a community. I was trying to invent a structure, a parish, a congregation, whatever word you want to use. I was trying to invent those things that already existed. So then it became, how can I find a place where my son can be immersed in the culture so that it becomes real to him, where he sees me and other people living it out, where he sees us relating to each other as Christians, where he can ask those questions of other people, where he can experience with other people. Where can I take my son to learn the things I don't know? Otherwise, he will learn something. The idea in America is that if you don't teach your children a religion, they'll find their own answers. But no, people out there are going to indoctrinate them into their ideas, whether that's secularism,
so you just
legalism.
Beat the crowd
Well, you want to beat the crowd and teach your children at least what you have come to understand is real, and you also give them the choice to really explore.
And here's the question for you, Adam. What if you got it wrong?
So what if you taught your child, this is a loving faith, God loves you, do the right thing, live this fulfilling life. They have proper brain chemistry through all of their life. They live with true fulfillment. And at the end of their life, they die thinking, I have lived a good life. I have built a good family. And now I'm going to go be with God. And they're at peace in their final moments. What if you get that wrong?
Yes.
And they die like that peacefully.
Uh-huh.
Then what does it matter if you got it wrong?
It's a fair point, right? And this is actually a fair point because we are not obliged from an ethical standpoint to never be wrong and to only teach our children the truth. In fact, every attempt to do so seems to fail. Every time we try to teach kids the absolute truth, they find a way to break it, right? And this idea that we simply have to do our best and act based on what we know and to deliver the information to our best ability based on our best ethics seems to be sufficient. That seems to be the expectation. In fact, children tend to be forgiving of you trying earnestly and failing, and them augmenting your knowledge and improving upon your knowledge, as long as you're open about it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you open about this with your son?
Oh
and
my
your
goodness.
kids?
I tell my son, question everything I tell you, and especially about faith and religion, because if God is true and if God is real, then there are answers and we need to seek them out. So your questions, if God is real, they will only lead us deeper into our faith with God. Question everything. That is my first instruction to my son. So, Andrey, let's make this more practical. I would love to hear from you because you're a little bit more of even a recent convert than I am. What have been the practical applications of religion in your life that have served you well? Maybe what has gone wrong even, but what has gone right since you have really merged with your new religious faith?
So there's several parts of religion specifically that are very powerful to me. And the first part is this idea that we have an obligation to be good, that not being good is actually not an option. And this is something that most men struggle with. The biggest problem that most men have is that they put things off. They say, I will be good tomorrow. I will be good later today. There isn't really a pressure on them to come in and say, I must now act in the best possible way to achieve some form of connection with some form of ultimate goodness, right? And if you do not have that drive, and you live a regular life, you're stressed out with work, or there's obligations, or you're caught up in your feelings, what's really there to keep you going? What's really there to motivate you to improve if you have no accountability? And if the highest entity you have accountability to is yourself, you also tend to show yourself a lot of slack. You tend to give yourself a lot of slack. So that was a key part for me. I really also benefit significantly from the idea of sin, that there's such a thing as sin, and there's such a thing as something that damages your soul. And it damages your soul permanently if you do not take redemptive action. So the idea of redemption. In Christianity, for me, the beauty of the figure of Christ is specifically lies specifically in the leadership by example, in the leadership through service, in the leadership of through unconditional love, where something that has everything said everything for somebody who has nothing and is not deserving of it, in an attempt to show them that they truly love them with no expectation, but at the same time holding them accountable to do better. Those are wonderful, wonderful concepts psychologically that would drive a man forward. And in fact, in my kind of agnostic days, I remember a perpetual feeling of purposelessness, because looking into myself and being honest about myself, I could say that I was never good enough for me. I was never good enough to go out and say, I will motivate myself, because I would look at my life and I would say, well, I didn't. I'm not a, top performing at, Harvard. I am not a doctor. I am not many of these things. Why have I failed myself? And this reflection of why I failed myself really came to the idea of I've actually lived in an improper life. And eventually, I do believe that there's more ways than one to live. I do believe that you can actually assimilate a lot of values that Christianity reflects and actually be a good and saved soul, even knowing nothing about Christianity. If you grew up in the jungles of the Amazon or wherever, and you did not actually have the knowledge of religion, you could actually be saved and go to heaven. Say a lot of religious teachings.
Yeah, the church has this. It's called the pious pagan doctrine.
Correct. And that is 100% true in my eyes. And it can be modernized too. You actually don't have to necessarily follow the religious teachings in order to be good and be a good human. But how do you convey that to yourself? How do you measure yourself against your own progress if you have no structure?
Well, this goes right back to attachment, which is you learn from childhood what will satisfy my parents, what will make my parents care for me, what will make them respect me, what will make them love me, or what won't, what will take it away, right? Humans are built from day one to be pleasing to our parents. So the structure of pleasing a perfect parent who will always love us really does build a lot of security and safety.
For me, it's sovereignty, right? So I do not like to be dependent on other people. I don't like it. And the idea that I would have to be dependent on something, you said it earlier in the episode, and we were saying, look, if you're not going to be dependent on the idea of God, you're going to be dependent on something. And I know many people who are dependent on their own success, on money, on their looks, on the numbers of women they slept with, on, there's some form of other accomplishment. And I still see the same dependency happening in them. And I just had to make a choice. What am I going to be dependent on? What is going to be my God? And is it going to be things? Is it going to be my own ego? Is it going to be whether or not I wrote a famous book or became a famous speaker or whatever, right? Maybe I want to become a president of some kind. But that road would have been finite. And I've seen a number of my clients walk the road and they hit tremendous success and then they are lost. They've gotten to the end of the road and then what? So when I reflected on myself, I said, I'm going to choose a road that has no end. I'm always going to strive to have a relationship with something I can never achieve and that isn't in my physical presence so that I can build myself towards that. That was the foundation. As a man, what are you supposed to follow if not God?
Well, as a man, if you don't follow God, then you will invent a God to follow. You'll invent a structure. You'll have to invent your own religion. You'll have to invent your own honor code. You'll have to invent your own 10 commandments. Yeah, and you'll never really be satisfied because those will all be arbitrary things that you'll achieve and then say, now what?
Now what? And also, by what measure do you measure yourself? Right? Now, many people have actually followed the same mentality. That's why there is this differentiation between churches. Many people say you don't have to have organized religion. I disagree. Because what it does is it puts you on a training schedule, right? When you're trying to learn something, when you're trying to build something, what you do is you sign up for a university or a class. When I was training martial arts, I'm a third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, I showed up and I went through all of the classes, I went through all of my gradings, and I followed a process, and I was on a schedule, and I trusted the system. So we, as humanity, have created a system which allows us to further ourselves. Now, personally, I believe that there's different flavors of the system. I actually don't see very much wrong with things like Protestantism or non-denominational things because they're built for people of a certain mindset to help them connect with God in a certain way. I don't particularly see a reason to tell them that they're fundamentally wrong and they're heretics and all this other stuff that many actually other traditional Christians believe. I think that's hypocritical, and I think it's judgmental. Now, for me, I know I found a place where the structure and the sequence of events is optimized for my brain chemistry. I need to have the firm, uncompromising structure of orthodoxy to keep myself in check. And I think that's also something that everybody has to decide for themselves is what protocol, what training plan are you following in your faith? Now, you follow a little bit of a different training plan. Mm-hmm. Why do you like that one?
The Catholic training plan specifically?
Yeah.
It provides so much structure. It provides, the weekly check-in, right? I give weekly check-ins to my coaching clients when they're couples. Check in once a week. How you doing? Revamp yourself. Talk about what's going right, what's going wrong. And that's one way to protect your relationship. We have that weekly check-in. We have the sacraments in the Catholic Church. We have partaking of communion. We have confession. I did that before I came here to do this podcast. I did confession. You can walk out squeaky clean, and you feel quite nice. You face what you have done wrong, and then you vow that you will do right again. Mm-hmm. And that's a very defining moment. And you do it to another person who is listening to you, and there's accountability there.
Yeah, and it's fascinating for those people who have never done a confession. I encourage you to try this exercise at home. Stand in front of a mirror and look yourself in the eyes and tell yourself what you did wrong, what you are ashamed of. And if you think this is easy, I dare you to try it because it is not. In fact, it's a lot harder to do that than to go to a priest and do the same thing to a priest in a safe space in a church, knowing that he is absolutely prohibited from judging you. That if he dares to judge you in his own belief, he will be punished by hell, right? And that, to me, was a great safety measure, that actually I was going to a licensed spiritual professional, shall we call it that, and actually unloading these things that were burdening my soul.
It's important that you be able to do that. That's one of the biggest, freest moments when people come to me to fix their attachment, is being able to go to other people. And I had you do this. You go to somebody else and you tell them, I am an anxious person. I have anxieties, or I have insecurities. I overthink a lot. I worry a lot. I worry about relationships. I'm not sure what to do. Can you be my friend? Right? And you have that moment where you open up to another human, but you confess your challenges and your difficulties. And it's so freeing when the other person accepts you. You get a rush of brain chemicals, and we get to experience that all the time.
Yeah. And here's the catch, right? If you think about religion as a framework that is supposed to teach you about how to be good, and good means loving, kind, genuine, accepting, all of these positive things that we're having trouble kind of organizing. You need a place to practice. You need a gym. You need a gym for your soul that you're going to, and you're going to have to learn how to do that by following rules and prayers. One thing that I really personally enjoyed when I started my venture into religion was reading the Bible, because it was giving me words I did not know. Like, it gave me a vocabulary to describe the states of my soul and to understand the states of my soul that I simply never had to run into before, because our life is so limiting. Like, we do not have a component of our life that is designated to understanding our inner self. We know our body, that's medicine. We know our mind, kind of. That's psychology, that's neurology, it's neurobiology, it's all the stuff that you do. But we very much forget about our spirit, like the soul and the spirit combination, at least in the West. In many Eastern practices, this is built into their cultural practices. This is built into their family practices. We have chosen to discard that. And now we're struggling because we have forgotten about a third of ourselves, and we're trying to leverage the other two, to try to close that God-shaped hole.
Well, even psychology, it actually means the study of the soul. So it came about as a bit of almost a competition against religion. Freud was adamantly opposed to all religion. He believed that only the weakest, most pathetic members of society needed a religious faith, which is why psychology and religion now are in such overwhelming clash. They don't have to be. They need not be at all. But this is what we've come to understand, is that we now study the soul purely from a psychology science
behavioral perspective.
Well, we have reduced the spirit to a behavioral piece. We have reduced the spirit to a mind that then is finite and is mortal. That's what we have done. And that has never really been the case throughout all of human history, that the idea that our spirit could be mortal and finite until now, because we can only measure so much of it. Now we have reduced it to this idea that our spirit is only the measurable aspect of ourself that is present when we are alive. That has never been the case throughout all of human history. Religion has always been the vehicle by which we did understand and measure and even strengthen our spirit. I love this idea of church being a gymnasium for your soul, and perhaps your priest or pastor or leader or whoever it is being a bit of not only a mentor, but maybe even a personal trainer who makes you go through the reps, who yells at you to go through the reps, who's come on, one more, right? That's very much my relationship with my priest, is a spiritual personal trainer. Is definitely the role he has taken on in my life. Is that something that you've taken on with your priest?
In some ways, a lot of times it is a trust-based relationship. There are many conversations that you can have without having them with a priest, because of the way that a lot of our services are structured, because of the way that the practices happen. The very concept of the priest being there as a guide makes you want to envision the possibility of even having a guide. And there's a lot of guidance that you will do yourself. People don't understand that this is not something that you are coached through and you just, go home and rest. Your work never stops. Your growth never stops. Entering into a religious life cycle means you actually never get a break. Right? If you crave that constant improvement, if you're driven by self-motivation, you're going to have something that is going to be relentless in its pursuit for your goodness, for your soul. And only then does it actually become interesting.
That's true. The religious life does not allow self-pacing. You go at the pace of constant growth,
yes,
constant improvement, constant awareness of where you are short. And you are, I would argue, and my relationship with God, you get times of rest, but there are trials. It is not self-pacing in the slightest.
And I like that because that actually puts me in line with many other parts of my life. So when I am parenting, you do not get to be getting breaks as a parent. You do not say, okay, from 6 to 8 p.m., I'm going to pretend you're not my child. Hey, sorry, kid. I don't know you. Run away, screw off. Do your own thing. Don't care if you live or die. You never stop being a parent. You never stop loving your wife. You never stop loving your parents. You never stop loving your friends. And this idea of having to constantly be present must be taught and must be practiced through something that is a similar relationship. Something that watches you and looks over you and holds you accountable endlessly.
Well, and here's something interesting with that capacity is, as a man who has to perform in every arena, as a man who cannot just drop responsibilities, the temptation is still there to drop responsibilities. The temptation is still there to do things that are going to be completely opposed to the well-being of your family or even yourself, right? You will at times be tempted to fall apart. You will at times be tempted to justify. You will at times be tempted to leave. There are plenty of fathers out there who do leave their families. There are plenty of fathers
but they do not escape.
Well, they don't escape, but here's the thing.
But here's the thing, right? People seem to understand, or they seem to think that having faith is optional. It is not. And this is exactly what happens with fathers who run away from their kids, for many people who commit and live in what we define as sin, which is a breach of their soul's integrity. They simply go out and they are endlessly escaping the pain of that rift that exists between them and their actual true purpose. As children, we are born with a desire for love. It is pre-programmed in us. It is something we seek. Like we seek a connection from infancy, and we're wired to be that way. Yes, we can choose to step away from that consciously. Yes, we can be dragged away from that by circumstance or even just lack of knowledge, by ignorance. But being apart from love is a painful state for us. So eventually, everybody's going to have to find a way in which they must be in touch with love, in which they seek love, and in which way they can understand, comprehend, and be a part of that love. And if you do not have religion, then what are you going to be holding yourself accountable to? What is going to be your path? And how are you going to follow that path? And how are you going to reconcile your transgressions?
Well, not only that, but how do you then transmit those pieces to your children? Here's a good piece. How do you verify that your wife is going to be sharing your same values? How do you verify that she's going to be loyal? How do you verify that she's going to work with you to resolve issues? How do you verify any of that? Another young man recently in coaching asked me this. He said, how am I supposed to understand if a woman is being honest and loyal with me? How do I know that she will be behind my back? And I told him, you never will. You will never be able to really verify that she is going to be honest and loyal behind your back. But what you can verify is, does she have a defining set of beliefs that carry on even into her most private moments? And is she truly dedicated to that series of defining beliefs so that you can understand her beliefs and measure her devotion to those beliefs and then trust in her belief in that system? Can you trust your wife in that regard? And that's one major reason that religion is important inside of marriage, for example.
If you can believe that somebody is going to be actually firm in their faith, that happens very rarely nowadays. I must say that really it will take years and years and years of observation in order to believe that somebody believes to the extent they're not going to quit, right? That to me is still difficult. I still find difficulty in understanding how somebody can have such faith that it will truly hold them accountable. Like it's something that is not very frequently seen in modern day society. We do not have almost anybody who can manifest that, who can show that.
But Andrey, we have evidence that religious beliefs are one of the biggest predictors of not getting divorced. Actually, we have evidence showing that more religious relationships and religious marriages can be some of the happiest and some of the highest rated happy relationships in existence. It is provable. It's actually proven by science that religion can bring not only happiness, but religious and marital stability for the family, for the couple, for the husband, for the wife. This is provable.
So what are the mechanisms then, Adam, that can be used? Let me actually ask you this differently. So let's assume that it's true for argument's sake. How does God strengthen relationships?
Well, through resilience, and through suffering. Here's an interesting piece. The term is on the internet is self-deletion, and everybody I think knows what we're talking about. Self-deletion has increased for every single demographic group in all of America. Every single one, except for a single demographic group.
Which is?
African American women, especially elder African American women. Now, they are actually, in America, some of the most religiously devout people in the entire society, which is fascinating.
So why didn't the Catholic, the quickly growing Catholic demographic?
Great question. It's because the Catholic demographic is largely right now what we call cradle Catholics. They don't follow the actual doctrine. They're cultural Catholics. They don't actually follow the beliefs. Whereas the African American women here in America, many of them are the guardians of religious faith many times, not always, but that demographic has some of the deepest, real, authentic faith, which is why it makes them so much more resilient against that despair, against that.
I like this idea, right? So a lot of people come out and they think that faith is optional. I oppose that. And I oppose it from two standpoints. You need it to grow, and you needed to hold yourself accountable to growth, but you also need it to navigate the most difficult and darkest parts of your life, right? For example, for our Orthodox services, the services are very repetitive. And I will be frank with you, I've gotten bored with many of them until I started going into these terrible, dark experiences, until I got these trials and tribulations. And then I understood the significance of going through the same service, which kind of ties you back to normalcy. It is like your life buoy that when you're down in the depth and the darkness, it helps you come back to the light. And the repetition of them was actually their saving grace for me. In a similar way, religion specifically, and God has taught me the meaning of mercy and service. Right, because as he has served me, which is why I love the story of Jesus Christ from the perspective of the symbolism of him, like the fact that he came and he showed us the way and he suffered tremendously so that we ourselves can be granted forgiveness and redemption. In many ways, that is what we're doing with our children. Like by learning how to understand the concept of him, by giving that archetype into our brains and associating with him and building a relationship with him in a similar way, we are like a Christ-like figure to our children. They look at us and they understand God through our relationship with them, right? And to them, we are suffering tremendously. I mean, you and I are here at this podcast. We could be lying at a beach, having margaritas, but we're doing this so we can have some form of good outcome for our children. Right, so we create this ability to have a relationship that is, in our definition, good with our kids. So we're basically building secure attachment, right? Mm-hmm. So would you say that building an attachment to God is something that allows us to manifest secure attachment in our life?
It's not only building a relationship with God. People get that wrong. You're not building a relationship with some deity somewhere in a vacuum who is somewhere in outer space, and you have a magical telepathic link to him, and you're simply building an invisible relationship with him somewhere out there. That's not really how it functions. It functions within a deeper system. So you have a connection with God. You have a connection with the people who believe in God. You have a connection with a community. You have a connection with all these believers around the world who share those beliefs. You have a connection with your spouse who shares that religious faith. My wife and I pray extensively together. My children and I pray extensively together. If my children and I come into a dispute of some kind, we trace it back to God, and we have a third-party arbiter right there. Or we have this set of agreements that we both believe in so we can solve the problem. Rather than feelings, it becomes, how do we both live out this shared faith that we have with each other? And the answer is to have secure attachment and build secure attachment with each other. The relationship you have to God informs all the other relationships you experience on earth. So he invests every other relationship you have. So faith, authentic faith in a healthy God form, and in my case, this Christian faith, it informs all your other relationships through grace, through care, through nurturing, through forgiveness, through accountability, through responsibility, through expectations, but then also through redemption and through assisted redemption with other people. It invests everything else with even deeper purpose, and it leads to secure attachment. It's very, very hard to have secure attachment.
Redemption. So this is actually a fantastic point, because guilt and fear are the drivers of broken attachment. You know, guilt if you're anxiously attached, fear if you're avoidantly attached. So redemption is the idea that you can overcome your past failings and to come back into the fold of good graces, come back into communion, come back into forgiveness, and that your sins can be erased. In fact, they already have been if certain steps are taken, right? So it's the idea that relationships can be repaired and they can be brought back to fullness, not partial fullness, but complete fullness. They can be healed. How does God teach us how to heal ourselves and our relationships?
Well, let's get into just a little bit of trouble. American secular society, right? American secular society. They have a religion. Their religion is politics. Politics, you can commit political sins against the other side. There's two competing secular religions in America right now. And you commit sins against the other side, and then you are unpersoned by that side. And the only real way for you to get redemption is, in essence, to strike a blow against the other side and viciously attack and put down the other side to try to prove that you are enough of a religious zealot, that your change is true enough and you have transformed enough that you will viciously attack the people you used to support. And that really is how American political religion functions, those two competing cults now in America. When we have God in the mix instead, it's not how much pain are you willing to inflict on the opposite side to prove that your religious zealotry is true. It is how much are you willing to submit to a healthier way of living that is in harmony with the humans around you and with your own biochemistry and with the creator who made you. How much are you willing to live in real harmony with all things around you?
So why is submission? And submission is something that is played through again and again and again in every religious text, not just Christianity, but Judaism and Islam and many other things. We are required to submit. And I actually have many people I know, some very close friends, that are absolutely opposed and rebel to the idea of submission.
Well, think of some people hear the word submission and they think of slavery. But I think of Miyamoto Musashi, who said that, reality exists. Truth exists. We can either choose to bow to the existence of reality, or we can be destroyed by it. Those are really our choices. Submission in this case is not about slavery. Submission in this choice is about the acceptance of reality and then learning to live within it. Learn to live within that framework. You accept that you have been fashioned in such a way that serotonin is better for you than cortisol. So you try to live within that harmony and develop and foster more serotonin, which comes about often through more harmonious relationships with humans and with God and a prayer life. And you foster that and build that. So submission in this place is not slavery. It is the acceptance of what is and then learning to optimize within that system.
So the idea of submission, I think, is also something that is often misconstrued and misunderstood, especially in relationships. Right? So the idea that the woman is supposed to submit to her husband has been rebelled against and criticized and attacked for many, many decades now. And yet, do you advocate that a woman must submit to her husband?
Let's look at the nature of what that submission is, right? Let's look at the nature of, is there a reason that one type of brain may be more effective at a top of a hierarchy instead of in the middle of the hierarchy? Is it possible that the man's brain could be built for stress tolerance and fast decision making, and that the woman's brain could perhaps be built for an advisor role? From what I have seen, from brain scans of men and women, from the way that the male brain observes and then acts, the way that the female brain observes and analyzes, the way that men and women communicate differently, from solution-focused views, the way that women on TikTok are endlessly saying, I wish he would be in his masculine and make decisions so I don't have to, because I am...
What are we having for dinner?
Right. Yeah, why won't he just pick where he wants to go for dinner? Because I am exhausted from the mental load of deciding, right? The male brain observes and acts upon and decides, and the female brain observes and analyzes.
You know, I really wish that people in society and society as a whole would finally take a stand, right? Decide, guys, decide on something. You know, have some form of structure and have some form of system. Because it's really driving me nuts is that people are talking about these random things as if they are optional, and yet nobody believes them, right? People are arguing about, should we believe denomination 1 or denomination 2? Should women stay at home or should they work? It'd be wonderful if we could have something that can just basically align us all and say, this is the society we are following. And there's actually a number of forming societies in the world that are simply picking a religion and sticking to it. Mm-hmm. And it's working out great because it's creating alignment. And there's no such thing as having a pain-free and conflict-free experience, right? Eventually, I think everybody is going to have an argument over what's important. Now, which side is going to win that argument is kind of an open-ended question. Do you see America actually going into a point where they're going to have a religious consolidation?
Well, we have before, and I think that we very much can again. We have the Great Awakening here in America, where people were breaking away from faith and they were falling apart, and the country was falling apart. And then they experienced what was called the Great Awakening, where there was a massive revitalization of Christian faiths. It's where a lot of the 40,000 plus denominations today spring from.
44,000.
44,000.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, okay, we've gone up a notch. But it's where many of those have come from, was that Great Awakening of let's revitalize that faith so that at least all of us have a shared structure for making making moral decisions and relating to each other.
Historically, humanity seems to go through stages, right? Mm-hmm. You know, they go into a very strict religion, and then they tend to walk away from that and kind of loosen up the rules and loosen up the rules and loosen up the rules. And then all of a sudden there's like a snapback. And we keep going through these cycles, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of years over and over and over. Are we yet in another cycle where this is about to happen?
Well, this follows the hard men create good times create soft men create hard times create good men, right? But what they don't talk about in there is that the hard men, and they create good times usually because they return to religious faith. They have a codified structure of how we will relate to each other and a unified what is right and wrong in black and white. And they follow it very religiously, as we say, and they build that structure. And that in turn creates a cultural renaissance that then fosters good times and growth, where people then become decadent and soft and don't need God anymore because life is so good. And they break away from God and they start exploring all kinds of other things, and then society starts to drift apart because they're no longer unified. Then they have to go through a cultural religious awakening for hard men to come back and build that structure. Religion is the framework for revitalization.
So why does God put up with this nonsense? Why are we even going through this over and over and over and over again?
And we look at that through the Old Testament, right? Why has God done that for thousands and thousands and thousands of years? And religion explains that as well. To the Christian religion, it is because God loves us and we cannot be slaves to him. He has to give us the chance to accept or reject. That really is the purpose of life. Will you accept love and give love, or will you deny and reject love and reject to give love to other people? That really is the ultimate decision. Even the pious pagan doctrine comes down to that. Did the person, if they never got the chance to hear about the gospel, did they at least give and receive love properly? Even Christ said in the last days, people will claim they were Christians, but they were not. He will measure people based on, did you give and receive love? Did you authentically do that? That's the whole structure of that faith. So to me, that is the answer.
You've mentioned that men in hard times snap back to religion, follow it, and then rebuild society. Do men really need religion in order to be men?
All of human history says absolutely yes. We don't really have a structure where we can look and say, hey, look, these guys revitalized their structure without any sort of codified moral, ethical framework. We don't really have that.
And I like that because ultimately, what do men do? Men build structures, they build systems, they build tribes, they build communities, and they have to come with an identity. And every community has to have what I call the operating system, right? Within Veritas, we've built an operating system behind a particular set of principles. Within your attachment circle, you build communities based on a set of principles. Now, societies are large and complex, and ultimately we need a joint operating system, something that defines good and bad, something that drives our core behaviors in order to operate. I must say, a lot of the Muslim societies are flourishing in many ways, right? In the Middle East, there's a number of societies in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia, and Qatar who've been able to take a lot of the wealth that they've been able to generate and try and turn them into something very productive. They're very consolidated societies. And we're not actually experiencing the same in the West, despite having even more wealth than them, which is quite ironic to me. And that really is a testament to the fact that having some form of a unified and organized and centralized way of operating is necessary for us to succeed.
Well, even to one last point here, capitalism itself is designed to operate within the structure of Christian morality. It is designed to operate that way, with charity, with generosity, with accountability, with servant leadership. Capitalism itself is an incredible system when it's guided by proper morality. When in the absence of morality, in the presence only of legalism and politicking, then capitalism itself becomes hell.
So, can there be morality without religion? Can there be a moral agnostic? Can there be a moral atheist in your perspective?
We look at the two competing American political cults right now. In the absence of God, you create a cult based on politics. South Park had a joke about this, that in the future, religion has been eradicated. So people have different structures of science and how people evolved and whose science is the purest science. And right now it's whose politics are the purest politics. Who actually serves human dignity in the proper way in the American pop culture cults. We have filled the absence of God with cults anyway. So I don't know that there can be a proper unified moral structure if we don't acknowledge at least that humans have human dignity. And to do that, we have to say, where does that human dignity spring from? Is it gifted to us by a state? Or is it inborn in us innately? And if so, why?
So if we go back to the idea that men build the structures of societies, and this has been kind of the historic way, what exactly does religious faith give to a man? What is it that builds in us the capacity to create secure attachment in both the family level, but also at the greater level?
It gives you the ability to measure if you are living in a way that is healthy for your spirit. It gives you the ability to measure how to handle disputes between you and other people. It gives you the ability to measure your personal growth and advancement along that moral track. It gives you an external motivating factor and accountability and responsibility that pushes you forward so that when you feel in a slump and you just don't wanna anymore, you still have to, so to speak. It gives you not only that, but then a structure in which to relate to other human beings so that not only do you have a framework for handling grievances, but they do as well. And you won't be taken advantage of within that framework of handling grievances so long as everybody actually follows the structure. You'll be protected and guided within that. It's not down to legalism. It's not down to what can I take from you.
What I like about it personally is that I like the internalization of the locus of control, right? My health, my spiritual health is decided by my relationship with God, not by my relationship with anybody else. I find that very attractive. It also gives me the ability to cope with significant tribulation because I can say that this is what has been sent to me in order for me to learn and progress, and ultimately I'm never alone, even through the hardest moments. When people die, when people leave, when things get taken away from you, or even worse, people get taken away from you, right? You have to have something to hold your mind together, because if you do not have that, and you are in moments of absolute crisis, what can you rely on if your own strengths have failed?
And I can feel some of the guys at home like, well, that's nice, but you're just coping. That's nice, but you're just thinking, and you're just handling yourself with a happy little comfort blanket. And I'll take that back to the conversation we had at the very beginning, which was, Adam, what if you're wrong? Mm-hmm. What if this isn't true? What if you live this moral life, you have harmony with yourself, you have proper brain chemistry, you have good relationships with other people, you've built this life very carefully, and you die on your deathbed thinking you're going to go be with God, and there's just nothing and it's lights out. My question to those guys is, what does it matter?
Yeah, well, to me, it doesn't, right? So ultimately, it's like, okay, I've gone through some issues in life. I've gone through a divorce. I've gone through, some relatively significant crises. And in those periods of time, I did not seek to excel. What I was seeking for is endurance. I just want to endure through the crisis, and I want to have the strength, the energy, and the clarity of mind to rebuild my life in a way that is going to make me now resilient to these specific tribulations and challenges. And when I was seeking that endurance, I really was seeking relief, like the relief and something to hold me through. And you don't have a lot of options if you're looking for relief. You can pop some pills, you can pop some painkillers, you can seek, sex, you can seek pleasure, you can seek dopamine, and I've gone through many of those things, and none of them have really worked, right? Because ultimately they hit one neurotransmitter or the other neurotransmitter, but nothing I found has actually hit everything across the board as well as it did when I came actually to the religious component, because it gives me peace. Ultimately, people look for peace even in tribulation. That epic stoicism that is conveyed to us through the Roman Empire, right, through these heroic epics that we have where somebody is so stoic in the face of tribulation. Why are they so interesting to us? It's because they are at peace in the middle of danger, that strength they have of character, where they seem to be in control and they're on top of it no matter how much they're suffering. They are, keeping the eyes on their priorities, their goals. They're not giving themselves into rage, into anger, into sadness, into despair. They are strong. That is an innate target for us, what we're supposed to be like as men. These are our heroes, but we actually need to have a path to become hero-like. And that's why we have this conversation with people who are supposed to, they call it following Christ and being like him. Ultimately, that is what we're trying to learn.
The biggest objections that I hear is, well, what if I live a lie? Well, then when you die, it doesn't matter. You won because you thought you were going to win anyway, so you go out thinking you've achieved victory.
I'll question that, and I say, what makes you competent to determine the truth? What do you think? Why do you think that you, of all people, are going to be the guy who cracks the truth about the world and say, I have finally found the truth.
The one and
the
only
truth,
guy.
The one and only for the first one in history. Like, that is the catch of narcissism. That is egocentrism. That is a lie.
Well, it's kind of like the one denomination that is 3 years old, and they have a strip mall church, and it's Pastor Uncle Joe, who for 2,000 years all Christians have been wrong, but he has the one magical interpretation. All other denominations are wrong. It's calling everybody else wrong and stupid. That itself is the fallacy. But then track it back to the next objection, right? Which is, if I follow a religion that's wrong, then I'm giving up pleasure through the course of my life. Well, the research shows that religious people tend to be happier because they have that belief that they're doing right.
But we give up pleasure as it is, right? Again, we're in these podcast chairs, we're having conversation. We could be on the beach with 6 beautiful Colombians and all for the price of $22, right? Somewhere in country X. Yet we're not doing that, right? We're actually trying to have these conversations. We're trying to be here and have these discussions. Why? Because we're giving up pleasure in order to find some form of purpose. We are looking for respect. We are looking for respect within ourselves. We're looking for our association with a true nature, right? And unless there is somebody in the audience who can observe us at all times, this is very quickly going to turn into a dangerous game. Like, the one thing that I like about having God as a man is that there is always somebody watching, not just to hold me accountable, but to also applaud me in the moments that I do good. Somebody who can give me the positive reassurance that isn't somebody else, to whom I do not need to sit there and tell them about my day and wait for that pat on the back, the very paternal pat on the back that may says, you did good, son. That's also a very important part of growing as a man. It's not just all doom and gloom and, avoiding failure. It's also receiving praise.
That's true.
And reward.
You get the love and the paternal relationship that you've always needed without externalizing it to a person who isn't worthy of it and can't take it on and shouldn't be fulfilling that role for you.
Correct. Now, here's an interesting twist in this conversation. We talk about God. We have not yet talked about the devil. Do you believe in the devil?
I do.
Okay, so why is the existence of the devil so important? Because this is actually the existence of the devil and the actions of the devil are the core aspects of organized religion, right? Mm-hmm. We have the church to protect us from the actions of the devil. What is the devil? Obviously, aside from the biblical explanation, and why is he allowed to exist, and how do we protect against him?
Well, rather than just rehash what the church is teaching, because people can do that, I'll say this, that God represents true, loving, secure, consistent, perfect attachment, right? Being in relationship with God demands that you be in a secure, loving, consistent, safe relationship with God forever. And being in a relationship with the devil, and we are all in a relationship with the devil, we just don't know it. It is the opposite of that. Our relationship with the devil is toxic, abusive, manipulative, exploitative, for the purpose of satisfying his vanity and his arrogance and pride. He will destroy us. And that ultimately is the relationship we have with the devil, whatever name you want to give him. He is going to lead us into our destruction, but pretending that it's not. Pretending that he's leading us into joy, offering us all kinds of good things in order to take from us. That is the voice that says, why should I follow God and stuffy rules and forego pleasure now? Because I will lose pleasure and then there will be no purpose to anything. And ultimately what we lose is meaning. We lose good relationships. We betray our wife. We betray our children. We betray ourselves for the sake of this empty pleasure. This is our relationship with the devil. And everybody is in a relationship with the devil. They just don't want to admit it.
What is so attractive to us? If God is so good, why is the devil so tempting?
Why do my kids want 8 chocolate chip cookies for breakfast? Why do they want to eat ice cream for every meal? Why do they get mad and hit each other when they get mad? Why do they cry when I have to discipline them for some reason?
Why indeed?
Why indeed? Because it doesn't feel good to have to delay gratification. It doesn't feel good to have discipline. It feels good to get what we want immediately right now, but it doesn't feel good for a long time. It only feels good until 8 chocolate chip cookies settle into your stomach. It only feels good until you throw up from that much ice cream. It only feels good hitting somebody when you're mad until they hit you back or they cry and then you realize you've hurt somebody that you care about. It feels good in the short term and destroys you in the long term. And especially if you do it every day for your entire life, your brain chemistry is obliterated and you seek complete obliteration yourself.
Sure. And many people will call that our human nature. They say these are shadow aspects. That's the dark side, to the yin and yang symbol. And they say that this is natural. But you're saying that's the thing that is going to kill us and destroy us.
I think that we are in a grand bet between what is true and what is not. Is love better than vanity? And I don't think that we are the ones necessarily even playing that out. I think that it is a disagreement between God and the devil over who is right, who is top. I'm not one of those people that thinks God can't exist without the devil. I think that there is going to become a definite moment where God puts his foot down and God is there very much without the devil. I think that question is going to be answered. It won't never be answered. But I do think that we are in the middle of that right now. I think that we are building that answer right now. I think that we are demonstrating.
We are the answer to the question.
We are the answer to the question. The question isn't, why do we exist? We are the question. We are the answer to what is better, love or vanity.
And that to me actually is a core answer to the necessity of organized religion in my standpoint, right? Is that for us, we follow organized religion because it is the path of people who have already answered the question, right? The idea of the saints, the idea of the teachings of the church, right? Specifically for my church, for your church, the fact that there is an established process for us to end up on the right side of that answer, and not to try to invent it yourself, not to try to go out into the world and try to say, we are going to do this from scratch. I'm going to face the devil on my own, is a personal issue I have with many non-denominationals, with many many Protestant religions or Protestant denominations. You think you can fight the devil on your own from scratch. There's something you told me a while back, and you said the devil is like the entity that never sleeps, is eternal, and has 1 million IQ and knows everything that has happened to date. Good luck. Like, good luck having to battle that entity. Good luck having to figure out how to overcome that entity. So to me, yeah, organized religion is nice because not only is it a method and a training program that you can follow in order to build ourselves towards our best selves, but it is also our shield against these evil temptations, and they truly are evil because they come from the source of evil in order to destroy what is the light within us.
Think of it this way. We are, even if you don't want to use more religious terms, we are caught in a war between love and toxic vanity. And all of humanity is caught up in this war. Now, there's a divine spiritual component to it. There's also a physical, tangible quality to it today. And we see that play out in politics. We see that play out all over the world, even in interpersonal relationships. Love versus toxic vanity. These are the battles. Now, you can go into that fight holding a pocket knife and screaming, running into the battle, or you can dress up in full armor with a full rifle, with a squad, and everybody being directed in the same organized sort of unit, and you can go take the field tactically and carefully and smartly, or again, you can run out there naked with a pocket knife, screaming, trying to take out the other side and defend yourself. I have chosen to put on armor and join a squad and a unit who is very unified and is moving forward on the side of love. That has been my purpose. And I'm not here to take anyone out or hurt anybody, but I am most definitely not going to be taken out myself or allow my family to be taken out through toxic vanity and through other people who wish to do harm.
I like the idea. I like the idea that ultimately there is a process, a rule book, and a playbook. That is the collective knowledge. The collective knowledge and the collective practices. I don't understand personally, why is it that people don't mind following yoga practices that have been around for thousands of years and say, well, this is an ancient practice. I don't understand why people don't mind, going through martial arts as I've done through the Japanese and jiu-jitsu side. And we said, well, we've been practicing this art for 600 years, and now it's cool and fine. I don't understand why people follow even herbal recipes, natural recipes. Say this has been an ancient recipe that's been around for 1,000 years from the jungles of the Amazon. And as soon as we say, well, this is a practice that has been used to follow the path of God, connect with God, and to learn the practices of God, and has been around for 2,000 years, people say, well, no, we can't have that. We don't need you. We don't need any rules. We don't need any best practices. We don't need anything. I'll figure it out myself. And it's really funny, when I was in the martial arts space, we would have some of these people would show up for what we call them the self-taught wonders, right? They would walk into our dojo and they would try to start a fight, and it's like, bro, what are you doing? There's only this many ways in which the human body moves, and, people older, smarter, and far more educated than you have already figured it out. Don't you want to leverage this and learn? But the problem is that it requires humility, right? One thing that I personally like about organized religion, and why I think it's very important to specifically men, is that you need humility. Yes, I understand that dancing in the middle of the church and singing Kumbaya, Hail Jesus is exciting. However, is it teaching you what it needs to be teaching you? And I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I'm at least asking you to ask yourself the question, is it teaching you what you need to be taught, or are you simply enjoying the moment? Yes, the grace of God is great, and hanging out with him is fantastic, as he's very kind. But don't forget that your life is indeed a battle, and you are actually fighting a war, and that war is fought within your heart, and then you actually must win every single time if you are to be fair and good to your children, to your wife, to your co-workers, to everybody who depends on you. You have to win that war, or if the devil wins, you will become the mechanism of their destruction, which is what he wants you to be. So are you just running around and partying with God, which is great and fine, Or are you actually also training and preparing yourself for the war that is happening within you every day? And at what point does the partying become a distraction? Right? At what point is it becoming a detriment where you're refusing to hold yourself accountable because you're having too much fun? So those are the questions I like for people to ask themselves when they're looking at their faith. And vice versa, I'll actually play in the devil's advocate and say, you know what, if you're an organized religion, if you're Orthodox, you're Catholic, you're whatever, say, has this become my crutch? Is this something that I simply do and follow the rules and think that I'm better than everybody else because I am Catholic or because I'm Orthodox, and that by following A, B, C, and D to the letter, I will be inevitably saved and go to heaven, and I don't have to do an inch above that, nor do I have to rejoice and be happy with the gifts that God has given me, as many Protestants are. I actually wish we could do all the singing and the dancing that you guys do. Our services are very different because it is so, it's such an important part, is the experience of the joy and the love as well. So there's definitely two sides to this conversation, but nonetheless, I believe that order is necessary in the face of chaos.
I agree. I will say, being Catholic doesn't save you. It doesn't. Following God, truly with all of your heart, following God is what saves you. I think that the Catholic Church has many of the clearest teachings on how God wants us to serve him. I think that even the Catholic Church itself says that other religions actually can serve the same God, but that we have the fullness of understanding of how he wants us to serve him, is the saying. Not that any of us are better. We are not better than anybody else. In fact, some of the worst people in the world have come from the ranks of the Catholic Church, to be honest with you. But finding that connection with God and really answering for yourself, how can I continuously seek love instead of toxic vanity? How can I codify that into a system? How can I build that into a system? Well, maybe follow a system that's been there for thousands and thousands of years that will help you do that, right? That I think that has been my answer. And I think that probably is many people's answer. And I think that people that are out there that are hesitant about that, take a second look. Take a very practical look. Turn off your emotions for a little bit and take a very cold, practical look at what these systems, these thousands of years old systems, might be able to bring to your life. The answers they might be able to bring, the relief they might be able to bring, the clarity they might be able to bring, the discipline they might be able to bring. Bring those best pieces in. Really take a look. Ask some questions. Ask the hard questions of people who can answer them. And then listen to those answers and see what that might bring for you. You may, as I was, be very overwhelmingly surprised, and against all of your better judgment and all of your own desires, find yourself being drawn deeper and deeper and deeper into a system that ultimately helps you become a better person and the person that you've wanted to be.
And I love that idea because ultimately my experience and the experience of everybody I have ever talked to about this is very, very, very clear. That is, the objective truth, your objective truth, is actually very close to you. And all you have to do is reach out and ask. There is a famous painting in the Sistine Chapel, which is the painting of Adam meeting God. And inside that painting, actually when Leonardo da Vinci painted it, I believe it's Da Vinci,
Michelangelo.
Right? Oh, so Michelangelo. Sorry, when Michelangelo painted that, he painted Adam and God touching fingers. And then when I believe it was the Pope who walked in, and he said, I need you to change the painting. And Michelangelo said, why? He said, because I need Adam's finger to be half bent. That all that Adam has to do to touch God, to reach God, is to simply straighten his finger. That's the only motion he needs to do in order to meet the creator of the universe coming towards him with all his angels. And even that is beyond his desire. Like that is the reflection of the nature of humanity. All you have to do to gain access to your objective truth, what is true to you, is simply to reach out and ask the questions, and the answers will be provided to you, is something that has been echoed to me by every Christian I've ever met. And the people who have done that have achieved tremendous peace in themselves and been able to grant tremendous peace to many other people in their lives, which which is very important. I think there's a lot to unpack here, Adam. I think there's a lot to unpack in the concept of religion. Definitely not enough to be discussed in an hour or something long episode. But I actually would love to hear everybody's thoughts in terms of where do you want us to go in our conversations about religion. We're just starting to explore this topic on both Adam's channels and also on I Wish You Knew. And also, what are your thoughts? The questions I want you to ask yourself is that, is there an alternative model that can be equally as efficient or even better at teaching us how to be good humans, and accomplishing our core purpose than religion? I want you to ask yourselves, do you need organized religion in order to be a good practicing Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever you want to be, or whatever you are? I want you to ask, do you need God in order to be a good man? Right? Do you need organized religion to be a good man as well? Could be an extension of that question. What questions would you like them to ask themselves, Adam?
Ask yourself what role you would like God to fulfill in your life. If God was real, what would you want him to do for you? Who would you want him to be? And really think about that. Maybe you want him to be your savior, or maybe you want him to be your cheerleader, or maybe you want him to be your father or a friend, or I don't know. Who would you want God to be? And then, is there a system in which God is that? And then where does your desire for God to be that thing come from? Where does your framework to even understand that God could be that for you? Where does that come from? Could it be an inborn thing that you were created with? Do you have a God-sized hole? And maybe you've just misidentified it as something else. Start asking those questions. See where God could fit, and I think that will lead you to the answer. That's what led me to my answer.
I love it. Adam, you do Christian-based counseling in addition to attachment counseling. Is that correct?
I have many people who do come to me for help understanding their religious faith. I have many people who do that. And I don't shove it down anybody's throat, but when anybody wants to help understanding that component of themselves, I am happy to assist them in that with coaching, yes.
Okay. And do you also incorporate that, if requested, into your relationship counseling, maybe even couples therapy?
Most couples who actually come to me because I have that religious faith, and they understand that I won't guide them to divorce for the fun of divorce, that all of that framework will be done within the context of biblical Christian understanding.
Okay, wonderful. And where can people get a hold of you to do that?
I am on adamlanesmith.com on my website. I am at Attachment Adam on Instagram and on YouTube. I am at Adam Lane Smith on Twitter. And just search Adam Lane Smith on Google, and there I'll be.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for this beautiful episode. And if you guys want to learn more about me, I'm at Andrey Korikov on Instagram. And you can also go to veritascreative.media to see what we do with content creators like Adam, and how we help build and augment their voice and develop their businesses into becoming full-scale creators and taking them further. So thank you very much, guys, for this riveting and interesting and in-depth dive into religion. I would love to hear your thoughts. So we thank you for listening to I Wish You Knew. Subscribe, comment, like, share, and we'll see you on the next one.